Hello again, and a very warm welcome to our little podcast, Sweet Omagh Town Internet Radio. My name is Don McGurgan, and as usual, I am joined by my co-host, or as he likes to call himself, the First Minister, Declan Ford. Good evening, Mr. Ford.
Mr. McGurgan, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Excellent. Very well. Good. How do you feel about the restrictions?
I feel, what, in politics? No, seriously, I think it could be the end. I think we're through it. It's pretty much over.
As those gentlemen who stood outside the old Northern Bank used to say, the end is nigh.
It certainly is.
You know, yeah. But you know what? It'll be strange for people adjusting to what they assume is normality.
Well, I suppose at the end of the day, 2 years is a long time. You know, at certain stages of your life, when you're very young, you know, yeah. Especially, and I think those who lost most are the young people, really.
Right. Well,
get to our age, it's supposed to be all memories anyway, I suppose. So.
As Sweet Omagh Town has proven. Yeah, memories. Memories. Where would you be without them? Huh?
Where are we going to go tonight? Let's go to a dance.
A dance. Well, do you know what? I was just reflecting, just as you mentioned this in our prep talk before this recording. And I was thinking of a dance on Boxing Night, and I vividly remember going to the Plattermen in the Royal Arms, and I can still see the vision in front of me, not of the Plattermen, but of me in my brown checked jacket and my Farah trousers.
Bell-bottom trousers.
Oh, say no more. And then you had those high plastic heeled. They were like they weren't boots as such, but they raised you up about 2.5 inches.
Called platforms, Mr.
Platforms. That was it. You know, I was the Beau Brummel of Omagh. Fashionable, stylish.
Man about town.
Oh, I tell you, yeah. When I look at it now, I cringe.
I wore my town toughs.
Well, what were they?
Like toe-cap shoes you found.
That's right. The TUFF.
Yes.
That's right. I remember them.
And a tank top.
A tank top. Like a Fair Isle sweater.
And a nice burgundy shirt that I got in Eddie O'Neill's.
Oh, I can imagine.
Imagine Eddie O'Neill's in Georgia Street.
Well, I would have purchased my clothes in the shop that I worked in on a Saturday in Jimmy McKibben's. And there was a man there, Davy Thompson. Davy had previously worked in Tom McClay's. And Davy was the manager of Jimmy McKibben's Emporium. Jimmy was from Kilkeel, I think, in County Down. And I loved it. And then an assortment of individuals used to come in. There was a Mr. Love would occasionally come in, A.A. Love. And there was a Mr. Coote, who was a sort of grocer. Big tall man, very dignified.
Yes, indeed, yeah.
There was a Mr. Henley.
Yes.
Used to come in as well. And they were all associates of Davy Thompson's. And it was a lovely time, lovely people, very friendly, very friendly folks altogether.
But for those who don't know, it's tonight we're going to feature Pat Chester's from the Plattermen.
Oh, yes.
And for those who never saw the Plattermen live on stage, well, all I can say is, I'm sorry. But the closest you'll probably get to it, if you want to watch YouTube sometime, and watch Bruce Springsteen. You know his open-air concerts that he does?
Right.
He asks the audience to throw up a song that they might like. And there's one that, you never can tell. C'est la vie or something, you never can tell.
Oh, yes.
They do a live version unrehearsed, but see the brass, there's a 4-part brass section, and it reminds me so much on the Plattermen brass sound. So if you want to hear a band, how they sounded, almost like the Plattermen, that to me is, it's just clicks it right back for a memory, you know.
C'est la vie, a Chuck Berry song.
Was it?
I think so. Yeah, you know, they were a marvellous band, and the best show band of the lot, I think.
By a country mile, yeah. And I suppose they didn't do country, I suppose that's why they were a mile ahead of the rest. And very different and very brave, I suppose. And at another time, another place, could have been, complete household names worldwide.
Yeah,
but I suppose, it's all about choices in life, I suppose. They took the choices, they stayed here, I had a good time. And very generous of Pat to give up his time to talk to us about the Plattermen as well. So.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a whole story about him, his life, and I suppose an Omagh man talking to Omagh people about Omagh. It's not an easy thing to do, I suppose.
No.
And to I suppose, take off the rose-tinted glasses and see the tough life that it is as well, Declan.
Yeah, and what I remember most about Pat's conversation with us was when he regaled us with stories about his time in Las Vegas and the music scene there. You know,
Yes.
I think Rob Strong had touched on it as well. Do you remember in the interview we did?
He did, yeah.
But Pat went into a lot more practical detail just about
Right.
the, you know, how often they played, when they played, where they played,
Yes.
and just the camaraderie between the musicians. You know, and he certainly opened a door on a world that is now long gone.
Long gone is right. That's right.
It was very interesting. You know, I mean, I presume you would have been a great aficionado and follower of the Plattermen in your youth.
I was quite young, you know. With 15.
And if you believe that, ladies and gentlemen, you believe anything.
No, I was out quite young. But I mean, I loved going to Royal Arms to hear the Plattermen on a Friday night. It was the ideal situation for that window in your life. You remember, but you know, the happiest time of your life or whatever. Queuing up, maybe you had a queue down till halfway down the main street, and then you sort of queued in bit by bit, and then you squeeze up these narrow stairs up.
That's right. You went up down the entry.
Yes.
And then up the narrow stairs and past the function room.
Yes.
I believe, yes.
And then that huge crowd that was there, just the atmosphere just took on a life of its own. It was our place. Our time.
Remind me, was there a balcony
There was, of course.
in the Royal Arms?
There was a clock at the very back wall, wasn't there?
Right.
Yeah.
Was there a mirror ball?
I think there was. The only thing I do remember, Declan, was the gas heating for some reason or other. You know,
Right.
maybe, and then they used to, obviously, in the very cold nights earlier on, they had to turn all these things off and open up the windows and doors and stuff.
Right, of course.
There's a huge crowd in it.
And did they have a PA system rigged up there permanently?
No.
The bands had to bring their own.
Maybe they brought their own, yeah.
And I think, didn't the Plattermen then practice in the Royal Arms?
They would have practiced there, yes, they did indeed. Yeah. And they would have practiced in St Kieran's Hall in Ballygolly. I remember them practicing in there because I would have worked in Loughran's Garage across the road from them.
Right.
And they would have met there, I suppose, as a juncture, I suppose, for all the different towns you're coming from or wherever.
That's right. Of course, the Plattermen, they weren't all from Omagh.
Indeed, they were not. No.
That's right.
At that time, they would have moved about and different personalities came and went over the years and things. But anyway, folks, without further ado, we'll sit back and remember the Plattermen fondly with Pat Chester's.
I was born in John Street. Do you know the Sally's? Do you know the smoke room in Sally's?
Very well.
Right, okay. McGowan's tailor shop.
Mm-hmm.
I lived above that till I was 13. And Churchill all the houses were in Churchill at the time, so my granny Kavanagh lived in number 18, which is, if you take the left hand side of Churchill going up, she was the second last house, which that's the vacant space now. Her house then was knocked down. But I had an auntie Maggie lived in one of the first ones, and I had an auntie Aggie who lived in the middle. So the Kavanagh family, that was where my granny was Kavanagh. And I was literally reared with my granny. She was one of the most lovable people in my life. And Granda was, he was well known around the town because he'd Martin Kavanagh, he'd only one leg. He was worked with timber, and he had an accident in timber, and an axe slipped and cut his leg, and it turned into a TB leg, I think, in them days. And Granda lost his leg, you know. But Granda sharpened the saws, and he was a great man for, I tell you, I just remember it once, Christmas time. There was a great snowfall, and Molly Hughes arrived in a horse-drawn sleigh, because Granda done all their goose, turkeys, he dressed them. And the Christmas time, Granda would have been plucking for weeks for that. And then Canon Collymore, who, that solicitor's there now just opposite the Church of Ireland, that was a big manse, and Canon Collymore lived in there, and he had one of the best gardens around, which we used to think we were robbing, but he was standing watching us because he knew we were only going to take a couple of apples, like, you know. And he used to, then he would chase us in at the end, like, type of thing, when we got enough, you know. Canon Collymore was a lovely man, and his son had, I think it was part of his train was down on J.B. Anderson's, you know. He had a big train set like that there, you know, the son. But Churchill was populated as roughly about, there'd been 15 houses. We were 18, Granny was 18 and 19, so there was 19 houses on the left. I'm looking up the hill, and there was maybe 16 on the right, and all those houses were populated with and families. You know, that was a busy street, and it was just a gorgeous place to grow up, because they were lovely people, all of them. Eugene Exon, remember Eugene? Eugene lived in the middle of the left-hand side, and what do we see? Jimmy O'Neill later took over a house. He wasn't there in my day as regards Jimmy, but Jimmy moved into it in later life. The middle house on the right-hand side going up, and what do we see who you had then? You had Maura Nugent, who's married to Joe Duddy. She lived there, and then John Street then was our shop. You didn't have to go anywhere else. John Street had a great row of shops. You had Fred Todd, and then you had Townsend's Bookies was there. But you had a great, I tell you, it's a thing now that they like to use collecting history. But from a photographic thing, I don't think anybody photographed it. There was Campbell's Butchers, but it was the tiles, and the tiles were all done cattle in the fields, and that there was the most beautiful set of tiles, and the floor was tiled and was strewn with sawdust. And Campbell's Butchers, it was a great spot. Campbell's Castle, like, you know, the same people, you know. And the McGrade's, Porrick McGrade, the taxis, Porrick's father and his uncle Phil, they lived in Johnston. Had the horses and all that, saddlers. One of my earliest memories going back was I was asleep in John Street. This was during the war, and we heard the crash, and 2 American soldiers were fighting, and one put the other one through the saddler's window. So that caused a bit of a commotion that night.
Nothing changes in John Street.
Nothing changes in John Street. But what I do remember from the war days was the troops going away. John Street, both sides of John Street were lined up with tanks, jeeps, army trucks and all, waiting to go to the station to pick up trains to go back to America, you know. Yeah. That's some of the earliest memories.
What about the pubs? The pub that what became Sally O'Brien's, who was there at that time?
McGill was his name. He was a great man for the Greyhounds. And lovely big tall man, very nice man he was indeed. You had, on the opposite side, you had another McGill pub. Then before that, you had, you know, the donut up there just opposite Sally's, that bar. That was owned by Garrity's, people called Garrity. And they were nice people. Anne, I remember Anne Garrity, she was my age, knocking about the street like. God, I could go down through them photos and give you a great photograph of all the Churchill gang standing up at the top of the street. My dad took it.
And was Quigley's Garage there when you were a child?
Quigley's Garage was my playground. The garage had moved, but the premises were still there, and there was some great old cars in it. They weren't roadworthy, but there was 2 lads, just as would have been the back street, the back of the houses at Churchill. There was nets there, and then from that down would have been Quigley's Garages. There was 2 lads had a wee repair shop on their cars, but they used to let myself and Eugene Exon and a fella Jim Conway. Jim lived up at the top right of Churchill. Conway's Jim went to England, so I don't know whatever happened to him after that, you know. But there was, then you had Jimmy Corey's shop, wee sweetie shop on one side, and you had Gorman's sweetie shop on the other side. They were the favourite haunts, like, you know. Jimmy Corey, Jimmy was a wee small man. Then he had Miles Corey. Miles was the son. And then you had the wee Protestant church. I think it was Presbyterian. Was that wee one? Maguire was the caretaker. I think there's a computer shop in it now, or at least was. you had of course, the Church of Ireland was always there as well, you know. So there was, well, there was Churchill, because then at the back you had another Presbyterian church at the back, and you had 3 churches, 1, 2, 3, 4 churches in the vicinity, you know. We were very, very happy times there.
What age did you get involved in St Eugene's band then?
I left John Street at 14, and we got a house in Glenview Cottages up on the hill. And Daddy was already in St Eugene's because the Chesters were all in it. My Uncle Bobby, my Uncle Pete, and all the Chester boys. We were all in it. That would have been after I went to Glenview, so I was 13, 14, about 15, 16. You know where Pat Cleary's tailor shop is? Have you any photos, or did you know that there was another hall there, St Patrick's Hall? Now it was nearly derelict. It was in bad shape, in other words. But before the Boys and Girls Club that Father Shields had, there was we were allowed a night or two in it. Was St Mary's Boys Club, which was the parochial, and Master McGowan from Culmore School. He was one of the tutors in there, and Brian Turbot started up a beginners class in there. Now I went in, and there was 2 other lads went in with us. There was only 3 of us in the class, and it ran for about maybe a month or 2. Maybe didn't even last a month. But the other 2 lads left. So Brian came to me and he says, "Look, Pat," he says, "there's no point in having a class with one fella, but," he says, "I'll start another class in the winter, and," he says, "I'll be back to you." So he came back to me, and then the next time I went to the classes, was down in the Labour Hall. So that's where we moved to the Labour Hall in those days. Moved out of St Pat's Hall, and St Pat's was declared derelict, unsafe, I think that was it. And that was where Eugene Exon, Jimmy O'Neill, Ray Moore, Michael Chester's my cousin, Frankie McBride, Tony McBride, all those lads were in St Eugene's. See, the makings of the polka dots and the Plattermen, that was the starting ground, you know.
And you learned the rudiments of music there, obviously.
You were taught your rudiments of music, your scales and stuff like that there. And then the first time when I was in the hall up in St Pat's, Brian gave me a clarinet. So actually that's my father's clarinet there, sitting there. And when I come back the second time to the Labour Hall, he put me on alto saxophone. So that was a good day that he put me on alto saxophone. And I've always been part. I regret that I'm not in St Eugene's now, like even playing, you know. I just had a problem with my teeth, and my blowing went with it. But I would love to have been back in St Eugene's. It was a great social thing, St Eugene's, you know. But then it was great to get taught an instrument. And then, of course, when Father Shields came, yes, the marquee started, and Father Shields had the carnivals. So St Eugene's always, but prior to that, we would have went to Drumquin Sports, Trillick Sports, within about, say, 6 or 7 miles of Omagh sports days. And I'd done a bit of high jumping when I was at the Brothers, and javelin, and I raced a bit. I never won anything, but I was there. But at Drumquin Sports, I got a high jump medal, and I had my band uniform on me. I nearly just saw the band uniform getting onto my knees when I jumped over the jump. But that was a big day to go out to the sports. You know, that was you looked forward to that, you know, because it was a day of playing. But then you got your break, and then you went around the fields, and you got your tea, or you get lemonade and stuff. It was always a great day out.
Yeah. Father Shields, what year did he come? Have you any idea?
That'll beat me now.
He started the Boys and Girls Club, did he?
He started the Boys and Girls Club when he came.
But he obviously he raised the money to build the schools.
The schools would not have been built without him. The shilling a week. Frances, my wife there, that photograph. Frances and all the girls who were in the club, they did the Shilling a Week, and Frances did all the Castle Street, Brook Street. Now, Frances would have been a great girl to have here to tell you about all the wee houses. There was a village, literally, where that car park is.
What's car park's after?
The McElroy's car park, as we call it, down the bottom
So
of
that's where
Castle
Francis
Street.
was from, was it, right?
Frances was 18 Castle Street. She was halfway up there, Brogan's. But you had Brook Street, the back lane, and that was leading you up into there was an archway into the Brothers' School, and in there, Frances would have told you the poverty, but while there were poor people, there were happy people. But Frances, she could have named you she named the families, the whole lot down there, but the conditions that the poor people were living in, you know, house full and maybe only a couple of rooms, you know, it was.
I remember talking to Dr. Mitchell about that. He said there's often two families in one house.
Oh, easy, two families, you know, one house. Maybe the girl had grown up and she got married and she just moved in with the mother and father, that kind of thing, you know. Frances' father and them is along there where the opposite the school, that car park and that there. Frances, you'll see the big tin sheds which are still there of that used to be Charlton's garage.
Right.
But going to the left of that, there was other tin sheds. Frances' father had turkeys plucking, and they supplied all during the war. They sold jackdaws, crows, pigeons, rabbits, hares, everything was shipped to England. And you would have seen coming to a Frances down to their thing, Jimmy Quigley on the cart and the horse with a big block of ice on it, bringing the ice, because everything had to be packed in ice to get it over, you know. And then at Christmas time, if you had a camera, if you're standing outside Frances' house in Castle Street and you see the turkeys coming down, a herd of them, maybe 100, 150 turkeys being herded down into the sheds to be dressed and killed and shopped, you know.
Innocent times, you think of it, Pat, wasn't it?
But happy times.
Yeah.
Well, there was definitely a happiness about it, you know. I started in the Father Shields got me a job in the Ulster Herald in the front office, which was Martin Mailer, Pat Kelly, and a fellow called Mike Churchill. That was the staff in it then. Teddy Quigley was just a reporter then. Mr. McGill was the editor of the Herald at the time. And my job would have been, I was just creeping into the band at that stage. People got the Herald posted to them all over, so I sort of looked after that end of things. And you did the counter and a few bits and pieces to get there, but it was a dead end job. And if you excuse the expression, the only way you got promotion in the Herald was if the man above you died. You know, that unfortunately just was the way it happened to be. You know, and so Father Shields knew then that it wasn't a good job, so he got me then into John Grugan. And what I'd done for John Grugan was, we took a car to Dublin on a Monday, and we would have bought 6 cars in Dublin. My job was to do the customs work and clear the cars for customs, and then John would pay the customs duty due, you know. And I'll tell you, there were some cars come over, and there were some cars written up that had bad bumpers and no lights and everything. They were perfect. But they went through customs and
that's the time when the borders were closed and you had
the border was closed, you had to triplicate everything was in triplicate, you know. So John James McManus then had the corner of John Street, the very last corner where you turned around to James's Street. There was a garage there. Dan McCaffrey had it for a while, but John James McManus from Enniskillen had it also. So he came to me and offered me another quid or two to transfer to John Street, so I was in with him for a while. So while I was with him, I was in the band, and I was in the process of buying a bandwagon of him when I fell out with him too, and then I became a professional musician on the dole. You know.
Right. Tell me how you came to be in the Plattermen and what way did it start?
The Plattermen was, going back to that, prior Plattermen, this one doesn't come out too often. Prior Plattermen, Father Shields had the boys' club, as you know, and he wanted something on a Sunday afternoon for the boys and girls. So he says to me, what do we get in a wee band? Because Jackie and Mickey McCann were in the boys and girls club as well. And my friend, pal, there's his card up there, the late Brenton Kelly, God bless him. Brenton's family lived in, you know, the con offices in there? There's a flats or apartments in there. They lived there. All the Kellys worked for Nestles. Brenton ended up as the top man in Nestles. He bought all their electrical equipment and all that kind of stuff, lifts, elevators, all that kind of stuff. But anyhow, Brenton was there, and he was in the club with me at that time, and he was an apprentice down in Gussie Hynes, an electrician. And that's where he went into Nestles as an electrician. But so Brendan, myself, Brenton Kelly, Pat Chesters, Mickey McCann, Jackie McCann, we played on Sunday afternoons in the Foresters from 3 to 5. And with no amplification, with no singer. So you just played whatever was, do you know this song? Do you know that one? Here we go. I'll start it and you follow me. And that was the way it went, you know. And the Saints got played about 5 times in the day, you know, and different things like that there. So that was a wee band. On top of that then, Brother Hamill had the table tennis club in the St. Pat's Park, right? So he ran the table tennis hop from 8 to 10 or 10:30 on a Sunday night. So Mickey Baxter was the accordionist there. So Brother Hamill got his secretary, so I think it was Patsy McCormick was secretary at the time. He came and asked us would we play there. So what we did is we played with Father Shields 3 to 5. Went home and got the dinner. Went down to the hut and played from to 10:30. We were professional then because we got 10 bob. So no, it was 10 bob or 5 bob. Maybe 5 bob. I think I'm jumping ahead of myself. We got 5 bob for playing on there. But then that got me into the Foresters to see the big bands. So that was Sunday was a very busy day, you know. And then the 2 McCann boys, Jimmy McKenna, who formed the Comets, he took the 2 boys, and that's what broke that wee group up. Well, then at the same time, Brenton O'Donnell must have been starting because I wasn't in the original when the 3 Moore, Jackie Sloan, Arthur McCrory, and Brenton O'Donnell. So it was actually Brendan was the starter of the band that became the Plattermen. And Brenton asked me one day down I went to a couple of rehearsals, that's what it was, where the band was playing. And somewhere my interest wasn't there, and I left. About a month or 2 left, then when the winter came, he started the class thing again. So Brenton's wee band, I think they got a couple of dates, I don't know where they played, and they call themselves the Melody Boys. And I went back to Brendan again. One day I was down the street, and just at Crane's Entry, I can remember it as well, Brenton meet me on the street. How you Pat, blah blah blah. What are you doing tomorrow? Sunday. I says, the usual, just knocking about. He says, you fancy playing with a band? I says, well, if you want me to, I will. So I went and joined Brenton again, back to Brendan. So Brenton says, go to Arthur McCrory's house on the Dromore Road and we'll pick you up there. So that was the start for me of the Plattermen going. And the early boys, we were called the Melody Boys, as I said. So you had Brendan, but when I come out, me and Arthur McCrory in Arthur's house come out to get into the taxi, which was McSorley's taxi, the big black taxi. That was our first bandwagon, and you had Arthur on clarinet, me and alto saxophone, Ray and trumpet, and on the back seat of the taxi there was this young cub sitting, whom I'd never met. And I tell you, his feet didn't reach the floor of the taxi. Artie McGlynn. And that was my first meeting with Artie. Artie's amplifier was the size of transistor radio. We had one microphone and a big Vertexion amplifier that we hired a Gussie Hynes for 5 or 10 bob for a Sunday for the gig. And we hired, it was either Gormley's taxi or McSorley's taxi that took us to the gigs for the first months. And that was the start of the Plattermen. Jackie Sloan's was the drumming. Jackie left and went to the Herald. Jackie Adams come in. Paddy McNamee drummed for a wee while with us at the beginning. The band then grew a wee bit. Aidan O'Neill come in vocals, and Artie suggested then to get Sean Hamilton, and he says, I'm teaching Sean bass, so we'll have a bass guitar. So that was Sean coming in. So that left it then. Jackie Sloan went into the Ulster Herald. No, he didn't. He went into BT telephones. I don't know what they were called in them days. He was a telephone engineer first. That was the original lineup. Brendan was the manager, and then Brendan's father bought a van, so we didn't have to buy, or didn't have to hire, and then we had a decent van, and Mr. O'Donnell used to drive us to the gigs. It came to another stage. There's a good bit in between, but it's, I'll be here all night sort of telling the wee bits. When Mr. O'Donnell and Brendan, as I said, that Brendan then decided, it wasn't a career type thing. He had other plans. So he wanted to study accountancy. But he left the band, went in to work for Art Kelly in the chemist first. He was a chemist assistant when Art Kelly was in John Street. And Brenton went in there. And the boys, we said, who's going to look after the band? Well, I says, if you want, I'll become the manager of the band. So I became manager. And I got a telephone installed in Glenview, 446, that was the telephone number, Omagh 446. And I think that was the number of telephones was Noma at the time. I think that was the way it was done. And I'll tell you a great one. The girls, they're all well and truly married now, and some of them have left us. But all the telephone girls got to know me, because on Monday morning I was on the phoned on every ballroom in the country trying to get gigs. And I used to buy the Irish Independent on Monday morning, and all the dances would be band wanted, So when I would have been answering the telephone numbers to them. Well, the girls got to know me, so I got a right few phone calls on the nodded through, if the BT knew that.
Oh my goodness.
But knew all the girls, and as I said, the girls were good to me. Because I was phoning Cork, I was phoning Galway, and just getting through to different exchanges was a job in them days. So I managed the band then. So you had Sean Hamilton, was the rock and roll vocalist playing bass guitar. You had Artie and lead guitar. You had Aidan O'Neill in vocals. You had we then took in Billy McGinty to add to the band, and Leo Dorn come in. Leo was in before Billy. Billy came in then. We were with Billy and St. Eugene's band. So Ray trumpet, but when Ray would be playing piano, that left the trumpet out. So it was good to bring in another brass. So we brought in, and so then Jackie Adams was on drums. Jackie left us. So to replace him, I had to advertise for a drummer, because we needed a drummer. So we took the Foresters Hall. We advertised for the drummers. We had advertised in the paper, rehearsals, drummer wanted, blah, blah, auditions, Foresters Hall, Omagh, blah, on such and such a day. So about half a dozen fellas arrived, and we went through them. No, every one by one they went through it. Boys said, no thanks. Then this fella come in, really nice suit on him, and he had a pal with him, well-dressed fella with him. And I said, who's these two guys, And I says, hello. I'm Johnny Murphy, hey. I'm Ballymena. I'm here for the job of the band, you know. He says, I see, so with Jackie's old kit, a lot of it, to rehearse at the rehearsals. And he says, I have a kit the same as that there. He says, Trixon, the egg-shaped drum. I don't know if you've ever seen them. And we went through a couple of numbers, and the boys looked at me again. And Johnny was drumming what I would call swing time, you know. You see? And one of the boys having to say, can you not... and I said, you know, Johnny, I said, if you had a rock and roll song, I'd go, bum, 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 bum. Ah, the teen beat, hey. The teen beat. That's what he called it. Play another number, boys. The job's yours. So Johnny was there for quite a few years. And that's how Johnny joined the job. I missed Johnny badly. Poor Johnny went to Paris with his wife, and they went to Notre Dame for Mass. They come out of Notre Dame and went into a restaurant beside Notre Dame in Paris and sat down for a meal, and Johnny just died at the table. Massive heart attack.
Young man.
Holidays. He left us and went, had a record shop in Ballymena, you know, and he done ticket sales for Jamaicans concerts, you know. Johnny was a gent, a great guy, smashing drummer, good fella, personality. You'd kill for, you know, he had a great personality, and Johnny and I we hit it off together. And we're pals for life, type of thing, you know. And so was Ray. Ray was in the middle of it. Us three of us, you know, we were paired off in the band just to do different things, you know. That's all. And you know, so the band. Then we said, you know, Aidan O'Neill came to us, and Aidan says, Pat, he says, I'm going to have to leave the band. And we sort of knew what score was. Aidan developed a hearing problem, and he was singing out of tune, and he knew himself he was, and he told me, he says, Pat, I want to leave the band. I says, are you sure, Aidan? Because we just loved Aidan as well, do you know what I mean? And Aidan left, so that left us. Oh no, prior to that, we had Brian Call in, but we said, listen boys, what about getting Brian Call into the band? So we had Aidan and Brian singing for a short period of time. So Aidan left, as I said, and then we had Brian. And that went on for a few years. Then we started, Jamaican started to record us. And we made a few singles, and we did an LP, the Rose Tralee LP we made. And Brian was not. In those days, you went to England for Lent. There was no gigs, just the churches closed the halls during.
This has been the early 60s, Pat?
And you went to London, Birmingham, Coventry, Manchester, that kind of thing. And we did that for a few years. 6 and 7 of us in one room, and it was tight at times, I'll tell you. But we got there in the end. Brian decided, and rightly so, when we look back on things, he was a country and western singer. He loved country and western, and he was a damn good country and western singer, one of the best in my eyes, and I'll always back Brian up. But he left us short. We needed a new singer in the band. So in between times, Sean and Artie had left, and we got Rob Strong in, and we got Alan McCartney in. We also got Simon Scott in, because Brian had gone. So that was sort of Plattermen Mark II, if you want to call it. And Rob just come in, and it was very funny the day we first saw him. Rob had I would call it a soup bowl haircut. It was just round, you know, and to the long hair that was on later. And Rob, at the beginning, he just sung Cliff Richard songs, you know, and the middle of the road pops that were, because what you had to do in those days was you had to have the top 20 if you were a pop band. So we would go into the Royal Arms or go into the Foresters on a Monday morning or Monday afternoon, after maybe coming from Cork on Sunday night, because Elvis Presley had a number 1 And we had to have that number one for the next gig, you know. So tough. You went on and got that number one, you know. Sean done the Elvis Presley stuff at the time. You did Little Richard, the soulish rock and roll of Little Richard and them boys. And Rob, as I said, was our pop singer, you know. And then Rob had advanced very fast. He became Rob was a brilliant bass player. And Blood, Sweat and Tears, bands like that were coming out. And with our brass, we liked what was being done. So Ray Moore was a great arranger. And we had taken in as well to add on, because Billy McGinty had left and gone to Australia. Billy emigrated. So we got John Trotter in trombone. So you had Ray Moore in trumpet, John Trotter, you had myself on tenor sax. Leo was in for a while, but then Leo left because he had to take, the father died and Leo took over the hairdressing. Alan McCartney played guitar, he also played trombone, he also could play trumpet, he also could play piano, and he also could write songs. He was a great bandsman. The first thing we done was the spinning wheel. We all loved the spinning wheel. That song came out at the time. And then, of course, we got this Blood, Sweat and Tears album. So we did all the numbers off the album. And that became Plattermen sort of heavy stuff. And the problem then, we did well for a few years and we recorded a few wee numbers. There was one thing I'll say, and I'll say it out now because I've said it a couple of times. The South closed us off. RTE wouldn't play us. You know, they just would not. We couldn't get airspace, or we couldn't get TV space at all. You know, and the only man that ever played any stuff for us in the South, even in Brian Colsley, by the way, I think it was a deliberate ploy to keep the Plattermen down. They wouldn't play Brian Cole's records in the early days either. Ireland Swings was number one in Ulster television charts for 11 weeks, I think it was, number one. So it must have been sort of all right of a record. But they never played it down below. Jimmy
Why was that, do you think?
The opposition to their own bands. You know, we were a better band, and then they will tell you that to the day, you know. And there was nobody, like, you know, the other bands were poppies. There was nobody sort of like our style in the South, you know. Freshmen would have been the newest thing. Only Freshmen were vocal to where we were brass, you know. And the Freshmen again too, although the Freshmen then, they got plays because Billy Brown went to live in Dublin, and a couple of boys went to live in Dublin, and that's what had to be done. So Billy could work in the studios in Dublin, and he was a good in the desk, and they got plays. But damned if they'd play the Plattermen stuff, you know. They didn't never do it, or as I said, TV, you know, they didn't get it. And what eventually sort of led to the breakup was different fellas left. Alan McCartney left. The band had split for members. Our drummer had left, Jerry McElduff, one of the greatest drummers of all time. I'd put him ahead of many's a top drummer. And he went and played with a few top bands in London. We were on Lurgan stage, opening up for Roy Orbison. Roy Orbison played in the town hall in Lurgan. He had a spare night off, and he didn't have his band with him. He just played acoustic guitar, and we were on first. And there were only a couple of hundred people at the dance, you know. Johnny wasn't there that night, so we got we asked the boys, and Alan and John McGovern was managing, could they get a drummer out of Belfast to fill the night that Johnny was sick. Johnny fell down, and Johnny took sick and couldn't turn up. And it was a genuine issue. It wasn't just he couldn't turn up. And we started playing the numbers, you know, and this behind. And the boys started looking at each other on the stage. What's this behind us like, you know? What a drummer. The band just went from there, sky high, in one night, on stage. You know, you could not believe the difference in the band with this guy behind us.
Just lifted the whole band.
Oh, he lifted the whole band. When we started doing arrangements then, Jerry just says to Ray, give me the trumpet part. He read the trumpet player. He could read music and just read off. And then he put his own interpretation to it. And then, oh, what a drummer, you know. Jerry left, and we got Noel Bridgman in on drums, you know. And Noel drummed for a while. Alan didn't want to be travelling at night coming in, so he left. So then that brought Philip Donnelly in on guitar. So you had Noel Bridgman, Dublin, Philip Donnelly, Dublin, and Rob had now moved to Dublin. And what actually happened was, me and Ray were sitting in Omagh with John Trotter. The boys were sitting down in Dublin, and the band was split. So we used to meet in Ballygolly Hall to rehearse, but the boys got fed up one way, we got fed up another way. Then they wanted us to go to Dublin to rehearse, you know. Then what happened was, Rob and the boys were learning new tunes in Dublin. They were writing, or they learned some new tunes. They'd come to our head, we don't need the brass in this one, you guys can sit this. You don't sit out numbers on stage, you know. So that developed. So I was walking on the streets in Limerick one day. The band was playing in the south, and we were into Limerick, stopped at a cafe to get a feed. And I went out to the street. I don't know what I had to go out to the van to pick up the van or something, or whatever it was. And I left. The boys were still in the cafe, and I went out onto the street and I bumped into Brenton Boyer. I'd been friends with Brenton for quite a while. I used to go to their gigs, and I actually, fortunately, he played in the Foresters. I shook his hand, and we introduced each other. And Brenton actually put me up in his house in Waterford one night, we were having a chat with the band playing. So he asked me then to join his band. And I just, with the ups and downs and the way things went, I just says, right, and I took the chance, and I went to Las Vegas for Brendan, you know. So that sort of was the end of the Plattermen for me.
One door closes, another opens, Pat.
That's it, you know. Las Vegas was great from a point of view of playing and all the rest of it, and the razzmatazz. But I was on a good wage when I was in Dublin, but the same wage had to be in Las Vegas, divided in two, and money sent home to the wife, because she couldn't take boys. I had 4 big lads, or you know, at school and that, and you couldn't be switching schools because the band lived out there for 6 months. So for the first year in the Big 8, I saw Francis 29 days out of a year. That was 29 Mondays that we played the first half of the year, or the second half of the year. You went to Dublin, you went to Las Vegas in the early January. You come home for July because the band couldn't stay over the 6-month period in Las Vegas, or you get hit for Las Vegas and Irish tax, right? So that was why the band only done 6 months. The second year, I just took Frances out on her own, and she came out for 3 or 4 weeks. It was the same story, and Frances said to me then, she says, Pat, this is no good. And I said, I agree, so we packed it in, you know.
Yeah, I would believe.
So that was the end of that.
Yeah.
So I went to Frank Chisholm after that. I went to Jimmy Conway after that, and King Creole. And 2 bands that I enjoyed playing. But again, managers, Frank was taken in. Me and Johnny Nugent and Terry Duffy from Strabane. And we had a good drummer down there too, a Strabane lad. Oh, his name's gone out of my head. Smashing drummer altogether. Good reader too, good jazz drummer. Frank got a manager in. McBrien was managing for a while, but this guy, and he said, the band's too old, Frank, them boys behind you. And he brought in a bunch of young fellas. Well, Frank was off the road 6 months after it. Because the young kids, they can't play rock and roll the way Elvis Presley played it.
No.
You know, that's why the old fellas were old fellas, because they could play that. They could play what was needed. Going back to the Plattermen and Chicago, Blood, Sweat and Tears. Monday night in the TV club in Dublin, we were superstars. Sunday night in Kiltimagh and County Mayo, we died to death. It was as simple as that. Because country was coming at a sweep, right? I was saying earlier on that Brian Call should have left in those days. We had a bit of an argument with Brian, as I explained to you, and Brian left the band because he wanted to sing country. And we didn't want to play country, you know. But Brian Call done the right thing because that's where he was. So it went then to that thing that we were getting the university circuit. We were getting in Limerick, Galway, the students. We were going right in the Royal Arms in Omagh. We were getting Derry. We were getting Belfast. But starting into Mayo, Galway, rural Galway, Athlone, all that territory, you know, the rest of Ireland, in other words, you know, no. And the thing was, you played in the TV club on Monday night, and it was like a rave concert, packed the doors, and you had all the top boys of the music heads all down the hall with, you know, so you had a great night. You went down on Saturday night to the Arcadia in Cork, and we busted the place to the ceiling. You moved out to Crosshaven, which is just sort of, and it was the same, you know. Go to County Cork to Skibbereen. Who are they? You know.
Pat, tell me about the importance of a magazine like Spotlight. Was that important to the groups?
Spotlight magazine came out, and we had a couple of front pages in it. You know, we had a couple of brilliant. I'll show them to you in a moment. They're over there. I have a couple. We were very lucky in Spotlight. John Coughlin, who was the manager and editor of Spotlight, loved the Plattermen and he loved the Freshmen. So he gave us as much as he just possibly could without overdoing it. So Spotlight was very good to us, you know. What I was explaining earlier was not so much Dublin. We couldn't get our records played. We couldn't get on TV. Gay Byrne wouldn't let us on the Late Late.
Right.
You know, we couldn't get on the Late Late or any of those. You need exposure.
Yeah.
Ulster Television had a top 10. We were number 1 in the Ulster Television top 10 for Northern Ireland. All right. So we decided, right, now we have to break into Dublin. So Jim Aiken says, right, we'll put a few pound into this. So he got 400 posters, 200 posters, I think it was, of a big map of Ireland swings, you know, really bigger than that picture there now, you know. Actually, if that picture was up to the roof, that would have been a bit the height of this poster. And paid a man to go around Dublin and paste Dublin with posters. There was a man went round after him and tore them down. They were lying on the street in Dublin on Sunday morning.
And was that an anti-northern thing?
It was an anti-northern thing.
Yeah.
There was more anti-northern. They weren't anti-northern, the country bands.
Aye.
It was, for some reason or other, it was the Plattermen. They didn't like what we were doing. Mm-hmm. You know, because we were to an extent ahead of our time with Blood, Sweat and Tears, Chicago and that kind of stuff. As I said, we were grand in the big towns, grand in the cities and others, but country areas we just died to death, like, you know. And country was creeping in and pushing the pop bands to the one side. As you know, Ireland's country now, you know. I know harm to them, they couldn't sing for buttons, and that's my input, because they wouldn't touch the like of Larry Cunningham and Brian Call and Big Tom them. They just haven't got the nya, you know. Brian Call, even Larry and Big Tom, I know they were big stars. Brian Call was offered, as you well know, it's well documented, that the Americans were after him. And that's not a story, that's a genuine. Slim Whitman was behind him, and they were going to make Brian a star in America. And Brian, he's a paddy, I want to go home, you know. And Brian Call, in my eyes, is one of the greatest country western singers that we ever produced. Because if you listen to his early recordings, and he was a smoker, a heavy smoker, but you listen to Brian Call's early recordings, and I'll tell you something, he has some fine voice, you know. And I would never knock that. But Brian done the right thing. Looking back in the day, we were maybe jealous or maybe mad that he cleared on to the thing, you know. But Brian had it, you know, and he had it big time, you know. But Brian was just a homeboy. He loved Ireland and that. He went to and played. He played at the Grand Ole Opry and things like that there. Like, I mean, he was winding down out in it, like, you know. But oh God, I would just love to have seen him go further. You know, he had that quality. You know.
Yeah. And how many years did you spend out in the States then? You were.
I was only there for 3. I was in Brendan Boyer's band for about 3.5 years. 2 trips to the States, because one of the years was cancelled. This is a good laughy. The band had been established in the Stardust for 20 years. I didn't know how long they played it, and there were a huge attraction in the Stardust. So the first year I went out to play the Stardust with them, and it was packed every night. But they got new accountants in, or the accountants got to talking. That 7 boys there, 7 slot machines, make more money than they're making. So we were replaced by 7 slot machines, or maybe more. So we had to wait a year, because they were building the Aladdin, and we opened the Aladdin. When I say opened, the Aladdin was 3-tier. I have photos there too. The 4 tops were when you open the door, this is the kind of band Brendan Boyer had. It was free. And that was the first step into the hotel. You were met by entertainment, free entertainment. So you went to the bar and had a drink and listened to the band. Second thing then would have been the pop star who was yesterday's star. On his way down, he played the 2nd tier. And then on the top here, in the Stardust, actually, it was an extravaganza show, topless dancers and all that they had. But in all the other towns that followed that, you had a kind of a 3-tier system. So you went in the band, you got the band for nothing, you know, have a few drinks, and they got a wild following. They got a great following. They packed the lounge, you know, and they had a fan club and all in the Light in Vegas. They were huge, absolutely huge, you know.
And what were the hours like then for the band?
9. You started the first hour, so you were hour on, hour the revolving stage. The stage actually went round, so you did hour on, hour off, hour on, and you finished your last show. Was 2 o'clock. You were off stage at 3. And the group that was with us, well, there was a couple of groups with us, but you'll enjoy this crowd. That hall there, and these are the dressing rooms. That hall is longer, so our dressing room was in here, and there was dressing rooms there, and there was dressing room, and it's as narrow as that. The girls that were on with us were called the Bare Touch of Vegas, and I mean Bare Touch of Vegas. They just had G-strings, but all the stars came to see them. They were the greatest dance show in Vegas. Fantastic dancers. You forgot about the nudity. I brought Frances in to see them. She didn't even see that they were nude. The dancing was that good, you know. And I was sitting one night, you might know this name, but I went to see them myself, just in the audience, you know. And I sat down, and this woman was sitting beside me and nodded the head, just that was all. I got up, do you not to see who you were sitting beside? One of the staff? I says, no. She says, that's Juliet Prowse. She says she was Elvis Presley's leading lady in one of Elvis' shows. She was in watching the show as well. Frank Sinatra came to see us in Las Vegas. The Stardust bosses were all mafiosos.
Right.
So was Frank, as you well know. And Frank, we had a singer called Davy Cody, not Brenton, now Davy Cody. Davy had a lovely voice. And one of the Stardust bosses thought Davy was a new Frank Sinatra, like. So he brought Frank Sinatra in to hear Davy, not to hear Brendan, you know. So Sinatra came to the show one night, and then we were out in the foyer and we all met him. And the bloody thing was no bloody cameras about. You know, I was sitting chatting the way we're chatting here now. Dead on. He's just an ordinary guy when you got that length of him, you know. But with him was Telly Savalas, Kojak. You know, yeah. He was along with him, and Frank's manager, not his manager, his comedian, Pat Henry, I think was his name. He was Frank's manager, comedian, that's what it was. Yeah. And here we're chatting to Frank and Telly Savalas. And Telly Savalas gave me a dig in the ribs. He says, hey, Petty. He says, Frank's going to walk in the waters all night. That's what he called walking in the waters, Frank, talking to the head. Yeah. He says, I'm thirsty. He says, come on. Telly's, me and Kojak now, headed off and got pissed. Loveliest fella. I got drunk with Telly Savalas.
Right.
You know.
All right.
I'll give you another good one there. We opened with, as I say, the Aladdin with the Four Tops. And Four Tops did a couple of weeks, and then Frank put his son in, Frank Jr., and we closed him. We drew the crowds in the Aladdin, and he died in the showroom. He brought Pat Henry, the comedian that was with him that night. He brought Pat Henry, his own comedian, on with his son, and we still beat him. We emptied. That's how popular Boyer was. Boyer was an attraction in Las Vegas. You know, people think he was only over playing for the Paddies. No, he was not. He was an attraction.
And were his sets kind of Irish oriented, or was he?
No, we did the were to an extent, but we did a couple. The early band didn't do as many pop. We did a few pops, you know, off the Americans, the sing along pop type of thing. We would have done a few of them because we're that kind of singer in the band. Davy Cody, for example, and the singer, Davy played trumpet, but he did that. Charles Aznavour, She. Davy had that kind of a voice, so Davy would have done that. Brenton then would have come in with Danny Boy, the Rose of Tralee, etc. The touch of the Quiet Man.
Oh yeah, Isle of Innisfree.
Isle of Innisfree. You know, once you had to hit the Americans like with that, you know, and they were in with that, you know. Then Paddy Reynolds, who was before me, or sorry, Paddy Cole, who was in before me. Paddy took his band out and broke up the Big Eight. That's why I got in. Paddy was a great jazz clarinetist, as you well know, and Paddy would have done quite a few tricky ones on the clarinet, you know, that kind of thing. But it was Brenton, mockery of Brenton. Never said he was an Elvis fan, singer, you know. Brenton put on the sugar and overdone Elvis's actions, like, you know, and but he would have done the Elvis come in actually, not while I was there. Elvis actually came to see Brenton and they became friends. Right. That's genuine. Tom Dunphy says, Patty says, I was sitting on the floor with him just the way the area says, just on the floor. Elvis was sitting beside me on the floor, and that. And he says, we're talking for an hour. He says, the loveliest fella, you know. And see, those kind of stories.
Did Elvis rule Vegas? Was he the king of Las Vegas?
He was the king of Vegas. He was. The way they put it in Vegas is Sinatra and Elvis. The other stars packed the hotel. Elvis packed the town. You know, and Sinatra, they packed the town. You know, that's just the way they put it. You know. Yeah. Oh, it was great. I went to see Sinatra that night, and he was standing there, so that was the stage. I could have done that and tapped his shoes, you know, and he nodded down, just give us the wink and all that kind of stuff. But oh, what a performer, you know. Yeah. I don't know if you ever heard him live, like, you know, what he done there. But it was a privilege to be there. Now, in fairness, you know, he had the voice all right. You know. I missed Elvis. That Aladdin opened up, and we had to do Aladdin, and on St. Patrick's Day, we had another contract in a hotel up in Minnesota that we went up and we did 3 weeks in. We always had to go up there for you did St. Patrick's Day in Vegas, and then you went up because the Stardust wanted you there on St. Patrick's Day. That was Paddy's night, all right. St. Patrick's Day finished up, right? That's our contract off for a couple of weeks. We go up into Minnesota. We closed the Aladdin and went to Minnesota. Elvis came into Vegas, and I didn't get to see him. Missed him.
Well, go back to the Plattermen. When you that quite dramatic change to the music of Chicago and Blood, Sweat and Tears, were those tunes, were they gradually filtered in, or was there a decision taken, we're going to radically change?
We just liked them.
Yeah.
We just liked it. When Robbie came into the band, as I was saying, Robbie was a Cliff Richard singer. He came in and sang Cliff Richard songs, you know. But Robbie liked a bit of rock and roll, you know, so he would have done the standard rock and roll medley that everybody does at the pub, you know. He would have done all them. But Robbie would have done an odd number, which we found we liked that because there was good brass in it, you know. So suddenly the spinning wheel came out, and we fell in love with the spinning wheel. Oh, we'll have to do that number, you know. It was It wasn't Blood, Sweat and Tears done the spinning wheel at that time. Who was it? But the pop hit was this. I'm damned if I can remember the name. It was Terra Power or something like that. There. Anyway, we just liked the number. We got to the liking of it was the liking of the brass. We all enjoyed. Big John Trotter had come in. You see, John Trotter's a marvelous musician, multi-instrumentalist. He play any instrument you hand him, you know. And Alan McCartney, as he played 3 or 4. Alan could play trumpet as well as guitar, so he was sitting there and blow. You know, is that kind of fella? And so some of the numbers you would have had 2 trumpets. Ray would have played trumpet, Alan on trumpet, John on trombone, and myself. And so you had a lovely lineup, you know. And Ray Moore plus John Trotter and Alan to a bit. But Ray Moore was one of the best arrangers in Ireland. You know, and that's not a boast, that's absolute fact. Even Billy Brown complimented him on it and bands to get there, you know. I was in Dublin one night, we put a wee band together, which I never told you about, the Sugar Band. We did a dress dance season in the, what do you call the big hotel in Dublin? We did the dress dance season. Joe Dolan was a guest at one of the dances, his band. And the engineers were setting up their gear, we were taking the gear down at the end of the night. We were on first, and Joe was, of course, on second. And the Joe Dolan's engineer, he says, you two made Joe Dolan's band small. He says, you blew them off the stage. He says, you're too brass. He says, it's better than they're 4. You know, and that was Ray Moore's choice of notes. Ray knew the note to add to the other note to make a sound, you know. And once he got 2 trumpets in the band, as I said, when Alan took up trumpet, you had Ray himself on trumpet, you had Big John on trombone, myself. That was a nice 4-piece lineup. And the Ray's arranging. Ray Moore should have left Ireland. That's another one of the stories. He would have been hailed if he'd have gone to London or somewhere, you know, or even if he had to move to Dublin, he would have, because there's none of the bands I've ever had as tight arrangements as Ray had, you know, or we had, you know.
I have been doing bits and pieces with Roy Esmond. Remember Roy was the photographer?
Roy was the photographer for Spotlight. Roy was a gentleman.
He's a documentary filmmaker. He married one of the, remember the Johnson's folk group?
Ah, right.
He married one of the sisters.
I know who you mean. Roy done us a few favours. Roy was good to us. You know.
His health's not that great, I believe, at the moment, but I've been on the phone to him a number of times.
You done quite a bit of photography for the Plattermen. Yeah.
And when I was chatting, I said, God, I recognise your name, Spotlight. And he was eulogised Brian Call and his cheekbones. He's brilliant, he says, to photograph.
Oh no, Roy was dead on now. Yeah. We talk about Brian Call, just this. Spotlight wanted to give a front page. They were doing fashion. And the lead singer and the female singer of each band, or they used a model, and they would have done a certain style of fashion. It was mid-July, the sun was hot, they wanted bathing suits. So I don't know if you ever seen this, did you?
No.
So me and Brian, just the swimming trunks, but this lush model, beautiful girl. She was a lovely girl, like, you know. No, she wasn't voluptuous type. She was actually quite a nice girl, and a beautiful girl. And they took us out to Dunleary or somewhere where there was boats, and we got a couple of photos taken getting in and out of a boat, you know, and the posy job, you know. Mrs. Call seen the album when it came out, Brian's mother. You absolute disgusting. What does Mrs. Chester think of her son? Absolutely disgusting. I'm ashamed of you. She ate the head of Brian. The two of us posing with this model, you know.
I mean, I've seen photographs. There's one of like Danny Doyle, and it's real 1960s Jack, with a model with a crocheted mini dress on.
Whatever the fashion was at the time, you know. Yeah. But unfortunately, my muscles are the same today as they were then. Rather skinny.
So there's no Charles Atlas jobs.
No Charles Atlas jobs, you know.
Fascinating stories. Would you do it again?
The answer is just actually no. I wouldn't do it again. it's not for a family. It's not for a married man. But not only that, I was telling Donald the way I was taken out of school. A priest took me out of school and put me in Ulster Hill, told me I had a good job for me, but he didn't tell me Mummy and Daddy. And I was ready for senior. I had passed me junior on the brothers. I had passed 11 plus, I had passed me junior, and I was within the next year I'd have been doing senior. That would have been your chance at university, you know. I'm not saying I'm brainy. I could have well flopped. I would have been the bottom end of the 50-50 of the class. Like, I was one of the bright boys. The fellow that owns a house across the street there, Arthur McCrory, the smartest fellow that ever passed through the school, according to the teachers. You know, he played in the band clarinet, but he left and became a teacher. A year for here, Frank McCrory, the songs, you know, his son. And Priest came along and he got me a job in the Herald. 2 reasons. First of all, I was a school goalkeeper, and we were in the McCrory Cup final, and the final was to be the next Wednesday. And he should have let me stay in the week. If he'd let me stay, I would have got playing in the final. And a fellow called Raymond Burns from the town, he was a goalkeeper, and Raymond wasn't the best of a goalkeeper, and we lost. And Tony McGrath, this lad from Six Cross, I was telling Donald here, every time I meet Tony McGrath now, like 60 years after, you Chesters, you left school and we lost the McCrory Cup. You this is the way he meets me. And then we have a drink together, you know. Tony still holds that against me. But Brother Murphy wouldn't let me play. I was off the register. He wouldn't let me play. It's only a couple of days.
WD, what was he, WD or
WD Murphy, that's right. I loved the man, by the way. I was very fond of him. Used to play handball with him up at schoolyard.
It was a full life anyway, Pat, wasn't it? Like,
Eh?
it was a full life. I mean, you plenty to do.
I would have done a lot of things differently. I'd have paid more attention to my books. One of the, in later life, as you know, I've done a bit of photography. So I was just Brian and I, even we bought cameras together. Brian and I used to take cameras with us in the early Plattermen. But I had the hobby of photography, and I wanted to try and better. So I went to the tech because the computers were coming out, and I knew nothing about computers at all. So I wanted to do the photography on the computers and that. So I went and done my study in Gills, and I got my study in Gills. And Damien Given, who was, you know Damien, right? Damien was head of that department, and Damien got me in full time as a teacher. So I was teaching special needs during the morning. I took the media students for their photography in the afternoon, and I took the ordinary people of the town who wanted to do photography at night, you know. And I had 7 or 8 other glorious years of my life, and I enjoyed teaching. I love teaching.
Yeah.
At home at night.
At home at night.
Just before
summer holidays.
Tell me this. Tell me about the Triumph Hurls, will you?
The Triumph Hurls.
Is that a fact or myth?
Oh, it's an absolute fact. Money was too good. That was one of the things. Is you went to Triumph Hurls, it was wrong. We got too much money too quick in a way. But I was the first, and John McGill was the agent for Triumph, so I went over and bought myself a Triumph Hurl. The Triumph Hurl cost me second hand £350, and I ran it for about 6 or 8 months, and then of course I wanted the new one. So the new Triumph Hurl was £790. So then Leah bought one, then Billy McGinty bought one, then Ray Moore bought one, then Artie McGlynn bought one. We were getting ready to go to Standard Motors garage somewhere in Belfast, where they were going to take a photo of the Plattermen and their Triumph Hurls. And Artie McGlynn, in those days you had to stop at the customs coming through in the morning and get your book signed out. And Artie had Speedy with him. So Artie got out at about 3 o'clock in the morning. He took the car this particular night, and Speedy was with him. And he went in to get his book signed. Speedy knocked the handbrake. He didn't mean it, but accidentally knocked the handbrake, and she wrecked her off the bridge and flattened the front of her, because the bonnet lifted up and the whole bonnet was gone like on them, you know. So that spoiled the bloody photography scene, you know.
This song is all about wine. And I'd like to dedicate it to all my fellow winos, especially the boys in the band. Oh, devil wine, it's got me in its palm. Oh, devil wine, made me lose my car. Closing farm. Once I was a proud man, till I started drinking wine. Now I shiver here on Main Street with my hand out bomb and die. Lord have mercy. Oh, devil wine, sell my soul to get you. Oh, devil wine, it's got me too far gone to pull through. Last week I was desperate, tried to break into a store. The cop came up and grabbed me, said I won't be around no more. Took me away, put the handcuffs on me, locked me. Oh, devil wine has got me locked up in this dirty old cell. GT's are coming on. Ha! It looks like I'm a